Okay. Just want to make some comments on Reality Check Radio, which is Voices for Freedom's product, and their campaign to get donations to get up and running again. Okay. I've donated to Reality Check Radio. I like a lot of what they do. On balance, I think they're one of the best stations out there. But the primary reason why I've donated to them is because, well, I hope they can reach beyond the in-group and not just preach to the choir. Of course, that's their hope as well, to try and grow and expand the audience. Because the so-called freedom movement that's online, they're not overly informing those guys, because people like me are informing themselves proactively. There's so much material on the internet. The difference is, of course, that it's not going to be spoon-fed to you like the nightly news. You have to go looking for it, but it's certainly there, highly accessible, and a lot of interesting stuff there. However, because of that, I would not be inclined to donate to Reality Check Radio if I thought it wasn't expanding to any substantial degree its reach and making people who are outside the so-called freedom movement think, if it's not doing that. And it's a big question mark to me as to whether or not they are doing that and can do it. Firstly, what I would love to see is for Reality Check Radio to become an actual radio station on the airwaves. So it's not just internet, it's on the radio. Because then they're going to get the common man or the normal market who isn't particularly preoccupied with looking at what these so-called freedom people have to say. They're going to get them flicking through the stations, stuck in congestion in their cars and going, oh, that sounds interesting, let's keep listening to that. But as long as they're on the internet, they're not achieving that, and they won't achieve that realistically. Maybe it's not possible to go on the airwaves, maybe it's just way too expensive, and maybe they'll be blocked from doing it, and if that's the case, fair enough, they can't do it. So what's the other approach if they can't do that? The other approach, as I see it, is to do some very good interviews and get some really good shows online. Don't worry about being live, make it a podcast. Live is impractical. The huge advantage of online, of course, is that you don't have to be live. And then promote the best shows, the most informative, critical shows. That's the best way to do it on that level. And that doesn't need to be expensive at all. That can be very, very cheap and based on voluntary labor. So that's the two approaches that I see as credible to reach out beyond the freedom movement. And there's another thing you have to think about as well. Are there people inside Reality Check Radio that are on a payroll to do what they do? Is Paul Brennan being paid good money, or any of the others being paid good money? I mean, absolutely no discredit to them, but you've got to be realistic. As soon as someone's on a payroll, you have to assume primarily they work for themselves, not their organization. So they'll be saying donate, 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 and not necessarily because donating to them is effective to the claimed cause, but it's effective for their great job that they're enjoying doing. Okay, you just have to see bias, financial bias where it is, just like for anywhere else. If that's the case, then that's something for Voices for Freedom to think carefully about. To what degree is Reality Check Radio representing themselves ahead of the primary objective of Voices for Freedom? Voices for Freedom may need to ask itself what Reality Check Radio needs to be beyond what the internal people of Reality Check Radio will claim it needs to be. Again, insofar as they're on a payroll or thoroughly enjoying their little hobby. So really, this is my message to Voices for Freedom. To what degree is your operation through Reality Check Radio extending beyond the freedom movement? If it's not doing that, then it's not doing anything more than what is already being done on the internet as people get to explore interesting podcasts that largely say the same thing. And again, if it's online, there should be no serious need for any serious donations because it doesn't cost much to do a high-end podcast, good quality, professional sort of a podcast. If it's getting too costly for you, all you have to do is scale back to the best shows. who's got the time to watch all those shows anyway? Only unusual people like me. Whereas I have the time to put it on all over the place. Most people don't. So you're actually almost better off having prioritized shows and marketing them rather than creating a whole lot of beta shows, we'll just call it that, probably worth listening to in their own right, but still beta, that are going to distract from the best shows. And, Reality Check Radio does do some excellent stuff. You could possibly stick with like the little documentary you did on fluoride. I thought that was outstanding. If you could do more of that, maybe invest less in operating a radio show on the internet and more towards creating documentaries and direct marketing of your best shows and your best documentaries. That would be my suggestion. That's my thinking anyway. But again, be careful not to overinvest in Reality Check Radio if it's not achieving a broader reach. Thank you. That's just my thoughts. Thank you.